As part of the Insight Maker overview module, I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about the settings and simulate options. Once you create a simulation model, either stock and flow or agent-based, then here are three very simple stock and flow simulation models, just to use as an example. This is just a flow into a stock. This is a reinforcing or growth structure where the savings account interacts with interest rate to create interest, which adds to the savings account on a periodic basis. And this is a balancing structure where the difference between the current state and the desired state creates a gap. And that, in conjunction with whatever the max rate is, determines the flow that adds to the bathtub. The settings menu is used to identify when you want the simulation to start, how long you want it to run, and what the time units are that it should progress or keep track of the changes in the simulation or in the model. Now, note that filling a bathtub in years is probably not a meaningful undertaking, but since it's just an example, we can get away with almost anything. So you end up selecting what the appropriate time units are for whatever the thing is that you're simulating. Pause interval is to indicate that you want the simulation to stop periodically and allow the user to make changes to the parameters for the simulation. The simulation itself is a numerical integration of differential equations, and it uses an algorithm to do that. The quick method is called Euler, and a more accurate method is RK4, though for most instances Euler will be fast enough. And the simulation time step indicates what period you want it to step through the analysis, the evaluation of the simulation. So that if I say I want to go from 0 to 20 in a time step of one year, then it will evaluate the model at 0, at 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. If I make the time step 0.5, it will evaluate the model at half a year, 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years, in that manner. Now, there's an approach to figuring out what the appropriate time step is, and that's covered in detail in the simulation module for Insight Maker. At this point, I just want you to be aware that there is an option for defining what the simulation time step is. So once you define the settings that you want, you go ahead and run the simulation, and you get a presentation, which might be a graph and it might be a table, depending upon what you've defined. This particular presentation is actually 3 graphs, one for the bathtub, which shows the bathtub increasing linearly over time, one for the savings account, which shows an exponential growth, which is sort of what's expected, and the third one shows the filling of the bathtub over time in a very choppy, linear fashion, chunky, and that's because of the settings for time step, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But on this graph, this output, you can add multiple displays, as many as you need. You can use these little arrows to actually change the ordering of the graphs or tables, whichever you've chosen. You can delete them. There's a scratch pad option which allows you to go ahead and actually draw on the output, which is really good for presentations. It works much better with a pen tablet than it does with a mouse, because I'm terrible at drawing with a mouse, and that's only visible as long as it's there. It's saved until such time as you rerun the simulation. And then the configure option, so that you can say that I want a time series, scatter plot, a table, which is, like a spreadsheet, or an agent map for an agent-based simulation. You define the title, which data items you want to appear on this particular presentation. You can deselect them by simply clicking and deleting them. tell it you want to add new primitives to the output automatically, so that if you create a new primitive on the simulation, it will automatically add it. A set of options for the charts in terms of lines and the legend, labels for the X and Y axis, and the option to go ahead and use a secondary Y axis on the other side with a different label with a min and max. So the output chart table configuration options are pretty robust in terms of being able to create different kinds of outputs and having control over what they look like. Additionally, this button allows you to edit this title, and this button provides access to a feature that's pretty nifty, so that oftentimes you end up creating a simulation and it's not doing what you want it to, but you've only graphed 4 of the variables, so that you're not sure what it's doing in certain places. You're probably looking for a problem, something that you put the wrong formula in, or you misconnected, or whatever. If you click this and tell it to link this graph to the results to the graph, when you mouse over the individual primitives, it will show you a graph of that variable, that primitive, and how it changed over time during the simulation, which makes it real helpful in terms of looking for something without having to go ahead and put additional things on the plot and run another simulation. And it's a marvelous time saver. And also, for primitives within a simulation model, many of them, you can define sliders. This max rate, it says, yes, there's a slider, and the slider max is 20, and the minimum is 1, and the step size is 1. So that you can actually go ahead and tell the system, tell Insight Maker, that you want to go ahead and change this. Now notice that the graph is changing the presentation as I'm changing the value, and what it's doing is it's immediately recalculating the value of that simulation and displaying it in the length of time that it takes to go ahead and change the value. Now note down here at the bottom, it says full speed, and you can do this and tell it to display it. If you tell it normal speed, you'll see it unfold. It's long since calculated the value of the simulation over time. It's just slowing down the way that it presents it so that you can watch it unfold. And if you go to full speed, you notice if you click it, nothing happens, and that's because it presents it so fast that you can't see it. So simply running this and stopping it isn't an option to go ahead and change values, because it's already calculated it. The options to change the values are, if this is linked, you can go ahead and change the values depending on which set of data you wanted to look at. This one is for the savings account, and if I change the interest rate, I can see this drastically change. The other alternative is in settings, to say, I want this to pause every 2 steps so that I can change values. And now when I run it, notice it goes 2 steps and it stops. And I'm looking at the savings account, and I want to change the interest rate to move it to 4, and click continue. It goes 2 more steps and it stops. And I can change it again and it'll go 2 more steps. But it does consistently 2 steps, because that's how often I told it to stop. So there is a way to allow the user to interact with the simulation as it's unfolding. So it's a pretty robust environment. Now note that Insight Maker is coded in JavaScript, and it runs completely in your browser, so that all of the presentation features and the simulation engine are in JavaScript in your browser. The only time it communicates with the server is when you open a model, save changes, or access, tell it certain things about who has access, or you delete it, or things of that nature. But for the rest of it, it's all running in your browser, so that it doesn't matter how many people are using it. That doesn't delay the response time. The only thing that determines the response time is your own processor. Now, there's a utility called HeroCalc, which is essentially the simulation engine for Insight Maker, which is available for direct access, so that you can use it like a calculator, or x squared. All right. What it also provides is a view of a lot of the formulas and the format of those formulas in Insight Maker. So it's a good reference. So all of these things are functions available inside of Insight Maker when you're developing simulation models. And there's just a ton of them, and it also does vectors and tables. Okay, so HeroCalc is there, and there's a link to it on the settings and simulate element. As I said, settings and simulate is an element of the Insight Maker overview, and there is a link to this module in the notes section of the video. So take a look at HeroCalc, mess around with it. It's pretty neat. So I'll see you again shortly in another video. Bye.